The lead up to this message, as it stated in the newsletter this week, was Christmas is over, now what? Christmas is over is a phrase that has taken on special meaning with Lainey and me in particular. A number of years ago when Lainey's sister Susan, she was back in her 20s, I think, was dating a man from Afghanistan. He hadn't been in the U.S. long, and she's tried to explain to him about Christmas and what it meant, both on the spiritual side and on the fun side, and that it culminates around this gift exchange where we give gifts to people we love and we celebrate that, and that's what the culmination is. So it wasn't long before Christmas that she explained that, and they met with some friends for their Christmas celebration, and the gentleman was participating, and everybody was opening presents, and they'd had a big meal. It was all great. And when the last present was opened, he said, "Christmas is over." Lainey and I we've been married 21 years, and with a blended family, the celebrations, as you know, can be different on different days and different things. We have a tradition of celebrating Christmas on the Saturday before Christmas. This year, it was on Thursday before Christmas because Jordan and his family couldn't be in until Thursday. But on Thursday night, we celebrated. But every time we finish Christmas and the kids and grandkids are gone, we look at each other and say, "Christmas is over." And we're excited because all of you are still scrambling around trying to find what you need to give, and you're pressured by it, and we just kind of coast on through, right on through. So Christmas is over, but now what? You know, Christmas is the season of hope and joy. The sounds of Merry Christmas and Happy New Year echo throughout our family and friends. We observe Advent, the Sundays of hope, peace, joy, and love. We celebrate the coming of the Christ child. You know, we've watched and waited for months and waiting on Christmas Day, waiting on the Christ child. Now, how long you anticipate and watch for Christmas mostly depends on your age. I know some of our grandkids who are old enough to want something, which is very young, they start anticipating very soon, September and October, and they're anticipating and watching and waiting. I'm not paying much attention at that time. So a lot of times it depends on your age as when you start that process of anticipating Christmas. I say mostly depends on your age because our son-in-law Joseph puts up the Christmas tree in August and has Christmas music playing all the way through the season. So despite his being 35 or 36, he anticipates us more than almost anybody that I know. So Christmas is over, and we're left with decorations that need to come down. We're looking at nothing to anticipate for a while. You know, that stretch between Christmas and Easter has always seemed so long. It just seems to drag on and on and on from one holiday to the next, or anything to anticipate. In fact, it is a long time. This year, it's 16 weeks between Christmas and Easter. It's only 8 weeks from Halloween to Christmas, and it's only 4 weeks from Thanksgiving to Christmas. So the fall is packed in, and then we get into the wintertime, and, you know, the wait is exacerbated by the weather and the darkness and all of that. So what now? Well, we get some insight from what we can do now from the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 9 and 10. But first, let me set the scene. The Christ followers in Galatia were Gentiles. They'd been Gentiles. They had not been part of the Jewish family, the Jewish race, or anything. And so Paul was preaching the gospel to the Gentiles and not the Jewish people. And he'd sort of taken that on as his mission, to take the gospel to the Gentiles. And he was preaching the message of God, and he says even that the one I preach is nothing that has come from a man, but has come from God, God's self. He gives some background about his credentials, and he talks to the Galatians about how he was so well read. He had a high position in the Jewish faith. He had all the credentials you could have. He was observing all the observances that he could as a Jewish man, and yet that was not worth anything to him now. So he's giving background, and he's trying to get to this major point. Because in Galatia, there were people in the Jewish collection of folks in that area and all over that were trying to ask, they were asking, in fact, not trying to, they were asking Gentiles to become Jews before they could experience the fullness of Christ. Now, they were doing that primarily by asking the men to be circumcised, that they had to adopt the Jewish observances, and that would make them have the full package of faith as a Jewish person, not by race, but by practice. And then the Gentiles would then be able to embrace Christ as well. So these were called Judaizers. And in his conversation or his letter to the Galatians, Paul asked the question in many ways of, what are you thinking? This modification was unbelievable to Paul. Grace comes through Christ, not observances of man's making. Paul even took the case to Peter. Now, Peter had been, when he was around Gentiles, he enjoyed all the food, he enjoyed all the drink, he enjoyed the camaraderie. And then when he got back around to his Jewish friends, he started observing all the Jewish observances. Well, Paul called him out on it, took him to task, and he says to him these words, "You are a Jew, yet live like the Gentiles, and yet you're forcing Gentiles to adopt Jewish customs." This doesn't make sense. See, Paul rejected the machinations of men and distills following Christ to a simple yet comprehensive challenge. Let's look at Galatians 6, 9, and 10. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Now, this verse, these verses that ensue here, both in 5 and in chapter 6, are the culmination of after he's made his case about nothing else matters. And when it comes down and you distill it down to just following Christ, and you don't need any of these other ancillary things, then what next? Well, he says, let's do good to all people. You know, different faith traditions follow their own form of Judaizer. Some add on essential observances for them to accept the fact that you have committed your life to Christ and you have salvation or in right standing. We do it in different ways in different church organizations. We imply sometimes that you've got to do this or do that before you can become a member. And it's okay to have some criteria for who commits themselves to the community, the local community of faith. That's fine. But when it starts taking on the meaning that you're not really Christian unless you're doing the things the way we want you to do them, well, that's going too far. Some people require those observances and some imply them. Let's look at chapter 5, verse 6 and 7. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. No observance, no ritual, no changing yourself in some like circumcision or some other method for a different face. None other has any value except faith expressing itself through love. And then he goes on. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. He just states it plain and simple. Whoever cut in on you and put things in your head that you need to do and need to go this way instead of that way, they're not the one who calls you. It's not coming from God. It's coming from men. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The only thing that counts is doing good. Now, the Judaizers thought they were doing good. People in some faith traditions believe they're doing good. But what would Paul say to us today? Would it be different than what he wrote to the Galatians? Surely it wouldn't be. I'm going to ask a question, and I would like you to verbally respond. How are you doing? How are you doing? Most of us say, good, or I'm good. Well, let's change the question a little bit. How are you doing good? How are you doing good? You know, we find that doing good requires insight, that ability to understand people and the situations in a very clear way. Now, we all have filters of our experience and relationships and different things that affect how we translate something into our own world and our own persona. But doing good requires true insight. And the best way I can say this, it requires us seeing the world through God's eyes. rather than my own filters? When I meet someone new, do I ask myself, how does God see him or her? When I encounter someone with a struggle in a certain circumstance, rather than judging or evaluating, getting into different things based on my filters, how does God see him or her and their circumstances? Just asking that question deliberately, I think would change many ways that we encounter and approach other people. General Norman Schwarzkopf died on December 27, 2012. There was an online post this week that shared a story that the general shared in one of the books that he wrote, a story of what his mother told him when he was a small child. He said, you have to understand that you're one of the luckiest people in the world. You were born white, you were born Protestant, and you were born an American. That means you will be spared prejudices that a lot of people have to put up with. But always remember, you had nothing to do with the fact that you were born that way. It gives you no right to look down on anybody who wasn't. No matter what other children say, you must never look down on anybody. Well, that's the way God sees the world. That's the way God wants us to see the world. Maybe this is a good start, that approach of never looking down on anyone and accepting our own privilege, whatever it is in your own circumstances. Maybe this is a good start to start seeing the world through God's eyes. Doing good requires insight. It also requires energy. Energy means a lot of different things to me. I don't know what you think of when you hear the word, but energy at times mean, do I have the emotional energy to what's needed to get through the day? Do I have the physical energy and emotional energy perhaps to work through some process that I'm in or some task that I have? So energy can mean a lot of different things. If we look at it, particularly in the world of just physical energy, there's something called primary energy, and that's the energy that has not been converted to anything useful. Fossils, waste, those things are primary energy. And before they can be useful, they need a secondary energy like electricity. That's a secondary energy. It's a carrier of energy to others. So there are carriers of energy that work in the world. And I think for Christ followers, the primary energy, that core resource, is the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. Doing good requires a secondary energy source, though, that carries energy to others. Now, I believe that in our world as Christ followers, the carriers of that energy and the secondary energy source that we use might be friendship with someone. Maybe through that friendship relationship, that by being a friend to someone who may not have others or may have several, but it's just an opportunity for you to connect. And that friendship is something that you connect with that person and you experience some things in life together, and you learn to love and care for each other. And that friendship itself is a carrier of that fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit does nothing without the carrier. It is just sitting there like fossils below the ground. Another carrier may be assisting others in a particular way. That carries energy in your encounter with that person or with that group. Maybe it's words of support or encouragement that someone needs. And in seeing the world through God's eyes, you're able to understand that, look at that, and say, okay, I'm going to offer some encouraging words and support to this person. That act is a carrier of the fruit of the Spirit. We could go on, but a carrier of energy, think about it, is dependent on there being a supply of energy, of primary energy available. How full are you, how filled up are you with the fruit of the Spirit so that you can provide that carrier of unlimited energy in the relationships that you have and encountering different people in the community and participating in different gatherings like church and groups, Bible studies, book studies, whatever it may be. But being able to, that carrier can only deliver what's available. So we must make that primary energy available and develop that and build that and expand it in our lives, those resources that are there. So when it's called upon to carry that energy through some vehicle to someone else or to some other circumstance, there's not a hesitance. We don't have to wait till we can build up a little more. There's no other reservoir to go look at. It's you and your world and your heart. You know, a carrier of energy that's dependent on that primary energy that's available, we realize that some carriers are more effective than others. But the driver to which carrier you initiate really depends on the person's need. I don't know if you've experienced before, sometimes a person sees a need and they give something that has nothing to do with what's needed. They give something that is just not going to attach itself and not be meaningful in that circumstance. Maybe it's someone who can always write a check, but the people aren't needing money. Maybe they're needing some other kind of assistance, some other kind of focus. Maybe they need a friend. The check's not going to solve that one. In a little bit of a trivial way, I'll illustrate this. How many have ever seen the crocheted covers for these things? I'd like to. How many of you still have one sitting in your house? Thank goodness. I had an aunt who made these by the dozens. And regardless of what the need was in the friends and the families that she knew, the one thing she did, she always delivered a crocheted tissue cover. Now, that's great. It's nice. It's kind. But I don't know what a new mother needs a tissue cover for when she's struggling with the baby and new baby and all the different things. I don't know what a tissue cover means to somebody who's just gotten laid off or lost someone. It was her kind way of reaching out. But it's an example of where what the person needs is not what's given. And so we need to pay attention. We need to understand that we connect with what the need is. So doing good requires insight and energy and empathy. Empathy is that ability to understand circumstances and the feelings of others. Because if we understand, we can do good. If we don't understand, it's likely we won't do good. I think there's 3 or 4 steps to this process of empathy. One is that we need to pay attention to see. This is not just seeing the world through God's eyes or seeing that person, but to have true empathy, we need to really see in detail what the circumstances are. And I don't know any other way to do that than trying to let God show us what it looks like to God. We need to ask questions so that we can understand. We can be curious and dig deeper into what's really going on so that we have a full understanding of what's happening in this person's world and their own experience. We can acknowledge the person's feelings. Sometimes that's all someone needs, is just to be acknowledged. Their heartache or their struggle or whatever they're experiencing. I don't know if you've ever said this to anybody, but I'm going to raise my hand on this one. Have you ever said, well, they shouldn't feel that way? I've said that many times. Think about this. That phrase has absolutely no connection at all to what this person's experiencing or what their attitude is or anything. It does not attach itself, does not intervene, it does not provide anything good. It's just a judgment that they shouldn't feel that way. Well, it's also ignoring the facts. They do feel that way. And telling someone you shouldn't feel that way does not change their feelings at all. I think that phrase should be stricken from our vocabulary. I can't really think of any time that it has any meaningful purpose to be said. So we acknowledge the person's feelings, whether we think they should feel that way or not. And we acknowledge the circumstances, because those circumstances helps define what energy carrier is needed. What are the details of the circumstance? What's really going on here? So that helps me understand, is it a friend that they need? Is it encouragement? What is it, financial help? What is the need here that I can be impactful and do good on behalf of this person? Well, insight, energy, empathy, and finally, making decisions. Doing good requires making decisions. You know, we make choices and decisions every day. There are different ways that we make decisions in our own life, but in this setting and trying to do good for someone else or some others in a bigger way, there are really two types of decisions that are needed. One of those is decisions that need immediate action. Maybe there's a crisis. Maybe there's something happening. And just in the case of the tornadoes, and there were so many things that were urgently needed that required immediate action. And you kind of know what those are. You can sense those, and you can find a way to intersect those things with the carrier of energy, whether it's the friendship, whether it's support, financial, whatever it may be. Those can be immediate actions. There are also process decisions. They're longer term. They involve maybe other people. They involve a longer term commitment from us. Now, in the longer term decisions, those process decisions, we can maybe gather others. Maybe that's needed. Maybe we need to learn more about the whole circumstance that's going on, not just by asking questions. Sometimes maybe it requires asking others and trying to fully understand what's happening in this circumstance. So you have immediate actions and you have process decisions. You know, the always leads us back to this question: now what? Christmas is over. Now what? Well, I hope that my answer and yours is let's do some good. Amen.